Nina, welcome back to Waterstones.
Thank you for having me.
It was a few years ago now I filmed a shelfie video with you on the shop floor.
Yes,
but now
I remember it.
You're here on the 8th floor.
8th floor.
For a full-on interview. I hope you're ready.
I think I am. Ready as I ever will be, but it is quite high up here.
It is high up.
I don't think we fully appreciated the view. I think we looked the other way and came in here and we got ready for the video.
All the good things. I mean, your book is called Went to London, Took the Dog. I mean, you could have just come to this one place and seen all the sights of London from up here.
That's the thing. It just is terrific. It's extraordinary, actually.
We'll save that for another video.
Yes.
We'll do a tour of the skyline.
Yes.
You make a very funny observation at the beginning, which is that you want to write it like an Alan Bennett diary. Could you maybe tell us what the crucial ingredients are for an Alan Bennett style diary?
Well, I made a big life change in 2022 and I decided I must write a diary. I do anyway, I like writing a diary, but I thought I'd do this methodically and I'd record every day. And I thought to myself, and of course it's now a published book, but I just wrote down this thought, which was, I'll do it like Alan Bennett. And I was thinking, what does he do that makes it so good? And I thought, what he does is, he'll have someone around for tea, like, say, Ian McEwan, and then Ian McEwan will be very late because someone's twocked his car, and then Bennett will go, oh, twocked, that's a new one on me. And then when you get this whole, he'll sort of describe what that means, and then he'll suddenly remember John Gielgud being twocked, or Marilyn Monroe twocking Arthur Miller's car, or something. And I've decided that's what Bennett does, that's what I'm going to do, and I think I have.
I think you have. For those who don't know what twocking is, would you like to explain what that acronym is?
It refers to having had your car taken without consent.
It's a great phrase.
Are you aware of it?
I wasn't until reading your book, so I'm happy to have a new acronym.
I'm really glad I've helped you understand that language. But it's a lovely one. I do love twocked.
It's good. And you're right, Alan Bennett would have had great fun with that concept. I think what I really enjoyed about reading the book is that because it's a diary, you have these daily entries that will be very funny. And so you have this sort of constant hit of humour as you work your way through the book. And then slowly through the year, these sort of larger themes start to emerge.
Yes.
Now, I presume as you were writing the diary, you couldn't have known necessarily what those themes would be. Or did you know that there were some sort of bigger things that you were likely to be covering in that year? Well,
I was writing the diary just for myself to begin with. For half of the diary, I was just writing it for me, future me, to impress future me, so that I'd look and think, oh, wasn't I adorable? Wasn't I funny? Wasn't I clever? So I wasn't authentically. It was a little bit performative. Then, about 6 months into the year, it looked likely that I'd get a publishing deal, and then I did go back over the whole thing, read the whole thing, and thought, okay, oh yikes, what am I? Oh gosh, I better not have all that in. So I'll take all that out. I mustn't talk about other people like this, so that all has to come out. And then my woman's health journey, which had begun to emerge. I'd had can we be frank?
We can be frank.
I'd been suffering a tiny little bit of ladies' incontinence. And so in the diary, when it was just for me, I'd say, was walking along Belsize Park, and Peggy, my dog, picked up a chicken bone, because that's what dogs can do in London, and in tussling to get the chicken bone out of her mouth, I weed myself. And so that became a theme for me. And then I thought, well, I mustn't have that I mustn't have all that in. Nobody wants to hear about a 60-year-old weeing themselves. But because it was on my mind, I was very observant of my friends of my age. So there was a constant commentary on, well, Rachel keeps weeing herself, and Stella's had her Marina coil fell out, and so had a vaginal prolapse. So I became obsessed with women's health.
Yeah.
As I was trying to make sense of it for myself. So I thought, okay, I'm going to take all of that out, because who wants to read about that? When I took all that out, there was nothing left. And so I really want to emphasise, this is not a menopause diary, but I did need that, and that became the arc.
Yeah.
That became the theme. So I think the vaginas do jump out at you a bit, but they're not everything, are they?
They should have put that on the cover, or some kind of...
Beware.
Vaginas will jump out at you.
Other things happened as well, but that was the one sort of... Yeah. And there was an inciting incident in November, which is more than halfway through, where somebody mentioned that perhaps this problem I had could be helped with a little bit of HRT,
Yeah.
hormone replacement therapy, and that, we don't want too many spoilers, but that proved to be true, and it's a very happy ending.
So what's fascinating to read is, as you say, you're through the conversations you have with your friends who are having their own experiences with women's health. And of course, what's interesting is how different all those experiences are. So the same issue, the menopause and what happens afterwards, is having very different side effects, I suppose, and different symptoms rather for everybody. And that there's not great support for you all, and so it's through your friendly conversations with others.
This is exactly it. So again, looking back, thinking I'm going to take all of that out, then you think, well, actually, it could be quite helpful and informative. And in fact, one of the blurbs on the book is from Satnam Sanghera, who says, informative. And all I can think is he meant that. But it was very, very interesting, that the thing you've just said about, we were sort of scrabbling around saying, is this that, and what does that happen to you, and also just watching each other, and I'm thinking, oh, she's sitting on a carrier bag because she's got a cough, I wonder why. Oh yeah. And then there were the sort of menopause deniers, so the women of my age who say it's nonsense, stop banging on about it, it's fine, for goodness sake, ugh. But you think, well, hang on, you've got all the symptoms. You're really foul-tempered. You hate your husband and want to kill him. You constantly wee yourself. You don't sleep. You smell of sugar puffs.
Yeah.
And then even those women, the hardcore deniers, came over in the end.
There must be a sense of frustration that this kind of information, as you've just sort of, very pithily put together in a simple paragraph, it's quite hard to come by, and it's a chance conversation with somebody that gave you that hint about using estrogen gel, wasn't it? That would make a difference.
It was a chance conversation. My landlady started talking to our neighbour, who happened to be a women's health campaigner and expert, a woman called Kate Muir, who's written a lot about this area. Yes, it was chance. Having said that it's better than it's ever been for, there's Davina McCall and there's Kate Muir I've just mentioned, and there is a lot suddenly. But what those people are saying is they're trying to redress the balance. They're saying everything you heard, you 60 and 70-year-olds, everything you heard in the 70s and 80s, these sort of horror stories and, we've got to tough it out and don't mention it. They're redressing that. But I don't think GP surgeries and NHS providers have necessarily caught up yet. No. So there's a lot going on now, but it's lots of chat and sort of comedy and books and stuff like that.
One of the other friendships that's really clear through the book is yours with Cathy Rensenbrink.
Yes.
You're often travelling the country together to do various literary festivals and events and things like that. I have to take issue actually with one moment. There's a moment when she's talking about getting a slightly sniffy response from a London Review of Books bookseller when she bought a book, and you say it's her fault for buying Hemingway. You have to go to Waterstones for that kind of book. Yeah. What do you mean by that, Nina?
Right, what happened was Cathy and I were in Bloomsbury Square walking my dog because we'd come into town and she needed a bit of a sniff and a wee. And we popped into the London Review of Books bookshop near the British Museum, and Cathy, we were each buying a book for my son who was going off travelling or something, and I bought him an Eric Newby Traveller's Tales, and Cathy bought him what was it?
It was a Hemingway.
It was a Hemingway. Yeah. It was a Hemingway. The Sun Also Rises. Yeah. And Cathy, who's she's a published writer. She does interviews in that venue. She's a book person. And she'd asked for a bit of help to find the Hemingway, and she got a sniffy response. She says, allegedly got a sniffy response. And when we came out, she said, I felt a bit offended. And I said, well, it's your own fault for buying a Hemingway in there. You need to go to Waterstones for that kind of thing. Meaning they won't judge you.
Right.
They're just, anything goes. You can just come in here and buy whatever you want, and no one's going to look at you and judge you for buying an old dead white man type thing,
Okay, we'll use that response verbatim for our next advertising
that
campaign.
Would be nice, yeah. We won't judge you. Brown paper bags.
Yeah, no judgment here, whatever you want. As I say, that sort of that friendship with Cathy it does cover some of that sort of female's health ground
Yes,
as well.
it does, yeah.
But also that the sort of the literary life that you lead,
Yeah.
going from place to place.
Mm-hmm.
Do you enjoy that? Is it sort of slightly strange when you have a book out and you have to go, he says, from place to place, talking about that book with various people?
Yes, I really enjoy it. So this now is probably, oh gosh, I don't know, is it my 7th book? This time more than ever, it's great because I now live alone. And so I'm out and about meeting people, and it feels a bit like a holiday.
Yeah.
And also, it's so much nicer talking about non-fiction. Talking about your novel can get quite, you're sort of in the novel. Nobody's really read it. It's right at the beginning. So you have to keep explaining. There's all the exposition. But with this, everybody's actually quite interested. There's plenty of famous people. That's quite interesting. There are people that they already know from Love Nina. They crop up again, the Mary Kay Wilmers and the people I knew then, Alan Bennett even. And it's much more fun to talk about. It's fun. I like it. And you're talking about me going on the road with Cathy Rensenbrink. Cathy Rensenbrink is sort of, I don't know, she's the patron for a few book events. So she's always there. At every book event you'll find Cathy there, interviewing somebody or talking about her own books or doing a memoir writing course. She's always there. And because we both live in Cornwall, we travel together a lot. And it's just been, it's been fun. It has been fun with Cathy.
You mentioned Peggy and chicken bones.
Yeah.
Because it seems that one of the most shocking things for you on your return to London was the sheer proliferation of discarded takeaway on the streets of London, which actually poses a bit of a risk to your dog.
It does pose a risk to all dogs because everywhere you go, there will be, chicken bones, bits of old bagel, wraps and, lots of lovely things, but, it's on the floor. And my dog that used to walk along, sort of trotting along, looking around, now just looks at the floor because she's hungry. And it's dangerous.
Yeah. Because that wasn't there last time you were sort of living in London.
I think 20 years ago when I left London, I don't remember it being such a problem. I don't remember so many takeaway opportunities. And I think if people are buying takeaway food, they're inevitably going to throw some of the rubbish away on the floor because there aren't that many bins. They sort of pop it under a hedge or over a wall and then Peggy will find it. Does find it.
One of the extraordinary things about the year is that there is incident, of course, that you sort of forget about when you're living life. And 2 sort of, I suppose, notable deaths. The death of the Queen happens whilst you're writing this diary, which is such a strange cultural moment to live through.
Yeah.
And I found myself doing that weird thing of when the coffin was being driven around the country, I sort of wake up in the morning and put the news on and kind of think, where is she today?
Yes.
Like this sort of strange tour
It was very strange.
How did you find that? And was it different, I suppose, being in London where, of course, there was so much activity?
It was very strange. The day that the Queen died, one of my landlady's friends came to call for her, and she's a journalist. And she told us the Queen had died. And it hadn't been announced. So I was thinking, oh, she's one of these show-off journalists that wants to pretend she knows everything. And, it's like, she's dead, she's gone. And I said, well, how do you know? And she said, well, we all know. And she said, you'll find out at 6:30 or 6 o'clock. She pinpointed, she said, it will be on the news, 6 o'clock. And so that was strange. And I thought, I'm in this world where, people know things. One of the things that I did in the diary, and I didn't know whether I would keep this in the diary, was that I've included in my daily writing stuff that has cropped up in the background on social media.
Yeah.
And so something will happen. I will be writing an introduction to a book by Jane Gardam, and I'll be writing away and my head will be there. And then I glance at my phone and there'll be an advert for the Finsbury apartment pant or a new jute rug or, and because I found the jolting nature of this, that you're doing something that literary or you're gardening and then suddenly never a better time to be in crypto. So I included it because I thought it was quite a nice sort of thing in the background. Thought I'd take them all out. And in fact, we did talk about taking them all out. And then I didn't because I thought there were a couple of things that happened that made it worth keeping in. And actually the Queen's death was one of those times because I was able to say, the Queen has died, and Anna Summers have tweeted a page of their bestsellers with a banner for Her Majesty.
Yeah.
And you know, the woman that saw the cloud, the shape of the Queen's face over a roundabout in Telford, and that was tweeted. So I sort of explored it through that quite a lot. And there was a very funny tweet, I hope I can remember it. Coolio died shortly after the Queen had died. And somebody tweeted, you know, Coolio, R.I.P., the best die young. And someone replied, but the Queen though. And all that going on, it's just comedy.
Yeah.
And without that, I felt, oh, well, I'm missing a trick, really. I do want all that in there.
Yeah, as you said, it's sort of those culturally jarring moments where
Yes.
you're taken away from what
Yes.
you're sort of invested in by something completely absurd.
Yeah, and you think, you know, something huge has happened. You know, what was going on in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then you'll get this bizarre advert for some pointless cushion that, you know, or it'll be a mohair jumper for women that they get compliments just by wearing it. And you think, anyway, I loved all that.
I reckon if I went round to your house, I'd find the jute rug, the cushion, and the mohair sweater.
No, you wouldn't find any of them, but you would find the apartment pants.
Okay, good. They were a worthwhile investment. There was another death, a sort of a literary royalty, which was Hilary Mantel.
Yes.
And it's really clear from the way that you talk about her and your friends as well that there's sort of this huge admiration for her as a person.
Yes. Well, she was in the diary, you know, ages before she died. No, she was dotted throughout the diary, and then Kathy Rensenbrink and I were at a literary festival when she died, and you know, we had a funny moment because Kathy, we just sat down in a cafe we were in St Helier in Jersey, and Kathy had done an event in a prison. I'd done an event with somebody talking about my novel, and we met and said we'd go and have a crepe. Is it a crepe? A crepe?
A
crepe.
Galette.
A galette.
Yes.
Yes, we went for a galette. And we were sort of asking about these galettes, and I was like, do I want a galette? And the waitress was saying, oh, it's made from buckwheat and it's no gluten. So there was a whole thing going on about the galette. And then Kathy glanced at her phone and she said, no, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry to announce this.
Yeah.
And then she told us, she said, I think Hilary Mantel has died. And the waitress was shocked, and I don't think she knew who we were talking about.
Yeah.
But the way we responded, she backed away and then called from the bar, can I get you both a brandy?
Oh my word.
Because we'd both obviously blanched and just gone, no!
Yeah.
And then later that week, Kathy was doing, of course it was all on the news, and even if you'd never heard of Hilary Mantel, you would have. It was on the news. There was a literary festival going on in the town. Everything was just, oh my goodness. Kathy did a memoir writing session at this festival, and I attended it because I had nothing better to do. And they're always great as well. They're very good to sit in on. And so Kathy was talking about writing memoir, and she said, you know, one of the things that's really useful if you want to write memoir is to read memoir, because there are some fantastic memoir and there's so many different approaches. And she said, for instance, and she named a few names, and she said, and Hilary Mantel. And somebody put their hand up and she said, who's that? And she said, Hilary Mantel. She's very good. And she said, oh, and they all went, who? And they went, someone said, can you spell it? Can you write it on the whiteboard? And afterwards I said to Kathy, I'd have kicked them out. I'd have said, you're not allowed to write memoir.
Yeah.
If you don't know who she is, you're hot. They were all adults, quite old, quite, you know, well-to-do, and half of them didn't know who she was.
You have just disqualified yourself.
And Kathy was cross with me because she said it was unconscious bias, and that why should they know, and who was I to judge them? And you know, obviously, if they'd come into Waterstones and not known Hilary Mantel, you wouldn't have judged them, because you don't judge people. No. And so I then got a telling off from Kathy, and it was Yeah, it was very interesting. And Kathy was dreaming about Hilary Mantel. And she was very much in her head. It was a very interesting time. I mean, we were more affected by Hilary than by Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah, a closer connection, let's
much
say.
Closer, yeah.
She is much missed.
Yes.
As I said at the beginning, the book has these sort of wonderful observations or things that sort of pepper it, that I was just sort of writing them down because they were making me laugh. And I'm not sure whether they're conversation topics, but they're still things I'm going to bring up. The first of which is when you say, why does Keir Starmer need to be charismatic? What is wrong with people? Which I thought was very, very funny, because it keeps coming up. It's still coming up now.
Again.
Whereas nobody asks anybody else to be charismatic.
No,
It's
even
only...
we don't have to be charismatic. We can just go on and be brilliant at what we do without being... It's just like... These are people who would probably rather have a Labour government, but they still do this thing.
Yeah.
And they're still doing it now.
What they mean is, why isn't he Tony Blair? Who,
yes.
of course, was, I suppose, charismatic.
He very much was. And I was around at the time of Tony Blair. I remember thinking, oh, this is great. Although Tony Blair came reasonably shortly after the death of John Smith, who managed to be charismatic and dignified and brilliant. So Tony Blair's charisma was a little bit kind of, okay, or maybe is he too charismatic? But why should he be charismatic? Why should Keir Starmer be charismatic? It really annoyed me. There were quite a lot of moments like that where I'm just annoyed.
Yeah.
I think, I ought to take that out. And I think, no, actually, I'm going to leave that.
No, leave it in there. Another thing that comes up is that you didn't take the opportunity to review The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole by Sue Townsend in 1982, I believe,
when it was
in the
first
LRB.
out. Mm-hmm.
Please tell me more. Why didn't you take that opportunity? Because presumably it's the kind of book that for you is like a foundational text now.
It really is. It was. I was probably 20 years old. I'd gone to be a nanny in London, and as I've written about in Love Nina. So the only way I could leave home, because I hadn't got any O levels or A levels, was to go and be an au pair or a nanny. So there I was. And I was, not a very good nanny, but I was living in the house of Mary Kay Wilmers, and she was then probably deputy editor of the London Review of Books, and then became the editor. And so her job was reviewing books, and my job was, buying onions and making turkey burgers, and watching A Question of Sport with the kids, and with Mary Kay as well. And we had a nice time. It was great. I read this book, the book you just mentioned, The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole, and I loved it. It absolutely. If I hadn't read that book, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know who I would be now, because I tried to do a bit of writing then, but I'd always thought, oh gosh, well, what can I write about? My drunken mother and living in Leicester, and oh no, who wants to know about that? And also, I'm so anxious and neurotic. And then to read this glorious, funny book where the narrator is neurotic and from Leicester and spotty and has this promiscuous mother, and it was okay that he was worried and anxious, and also it was funny and entertaining. So it was brilliant for me. I went, wow. And everybody was saying the same thing. They were liking it for different reasons, a variety of reasons. But everybody liked it. All those accomplished people in that street where I lived, all the Alan Bennetts and the Jonathan Millers, they were all saying, yes, it's marvellous. They absolutely loved it. And I said to Mary Kay, I love it. It's probably my favourite book that I've ever read. And she said, would you like to review it for the paper?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, here we go. I thought, so I'm cooking the onions. I'm bloody driving the kids to their drama club.
Yeah.
And I've got to do your fucking job for you. And I thought, no, I'm not doing it. What a bizarre attitude. Now imagine if I'd done that, because I'd have done a good job, because I was opinionated and quite confident in that respect then.
Yeah.
I'd have done a really good job. I'd now be editor of the London Review of Books.
Yep.
I'd be Jean McNichol.
Yep. You could afford all the Finsbury apartment pants that you wanted.
I wouldn't need that.
You wouldn't.
I'd be in a vintage tweed suit. Why did I do that? And there are so many little times in my life where I think, perhaps I should have done that. I got not an offer of a book deal, but I got a very keen letter from Faber in 1987 saying, we really loved these stories. Please send us more. We love your voice. I've still got the letter. I showed it to my son the other day and he went, Mum. And I've written on the bottom, not ready. I just felt I wasn't ready.
Yeah.
I'd got an Amstrad typing thing and I typed up some of my stories and I thought, what am I going to do? Be allowed to send them to Faber, because you didn't do agents in those days. No. I sent them straight to this woman at Faber. She got back to me and I didn't. Isn't that ridiculous?
Well, but I mean, you know, these things happen for a reason, I might say, which is very, very twee. But you know that
it's unlike you to be so twee. But yeah, I think, you know, other things have happened. You know, I was a teaching assistant for a couple of years and that was fun.
Yeah.
That I wouldn't have done if I'd become the next Ian McEwan.
And would you be happy as the editor of the London Review of Books? I mean...
Yes.
Okay.
I'd be very happy.
When that position next becomes available, you can send in your application.
Yes.
And just to finish off, one that personally I found very touching was the sentence, "Is Zagazoo sad? I say no, bittersweet."
Yeah.
I think Zagazoo is one of the underrated classic children's books.
Me too.
But tell me why you love it.
I love it because it takes a while to understand what's happening, and it's ostensibly for children, but actually children couldn't possibly understand what's being said there.
Yep.
But it's a tiny peek into the future. As you're sitting there with your 3-year-old and you're holding around them the way you have to do, it suddenly dawns on you that you're going to become those pelicans. Spoilers.
Spoilers. This isn't going to make any sense to anyone.
No, if anyone doesn't, but I think enough people will.
Yeah.
It's, for anyone who doesn't know, I'm terribly sorry, but you will one day and you'll be happy that we've brought it up. Isn't it a fantastic book?
It's amazing. I think it's one of the most profound books about parenthood that exists.
Oh, me
and
too.
And it does it in just about 30 pages or whatever it is.
With no words.
Yeah.
There's another book I just want to mention. Not Now, Bernard.
Not Now, Bernard. Great book. Yeah.
Very good children's book. But let's go back to Zagazoo. Zagazoo, amazing.
Yeah.
And I look at it sometimes and just think, it's life.
Yeah. It is. It's fantastic. I recently bought all the copies I could find in Waterstones in order to give to my cousins who'd all had children at various ages, knowing that it doesn't matter how old the child is, that there's that moment of recognition as you go through the book.
And did they get it?
Yeah, they all loved it. And the kids, as you say, the kids love it.
The kids love it because there's pictures.
A fun story.
Yes, it's fun.
But then I think as for the parents, as they're reading it, there's this just moment where it just kind of hits you right in the solar plexus.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Well, there we go. I'm glad we've connected with Zagazoo.
Oh, I'm so glad that you picked up on... Nobody's mentioned that, and I've talked about this book a lot.
My first original question.
Yeah. Well, I don't know whether it is your first, but I don't think anyone else will raise it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for the book. It's been an absolute pleasure to read. Even more fun to talk to you about it, so thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.